This is System Crash, a weekly tech news show that's willing to tell the hard truths about how tech and the titans who own and operate it is really transforming the world. I am not Paris Marx. I am Brian Merchant. Paris is out to all of you listeners. It is just me, Brian, and our guest host, our first guest host for System Crash, I should say, my fellow Angelino and doom-looping compadre, Cory Doctorow. Cory, thanks for joining us here.
Thank you very much. I'm half you, half Paris, because I'm an Angelino from Canada.
we split the difference. We want to get scientific about it and find the perfect specimen to
I'm the hybridized version. I am Paris Merchant.
Yeah, and maybe after this, we'll actually just have to give you the show because you're actually replacing us. We're both unnecessary because you embody the both of us.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, we've been wanting to get you on the show, Cory, to talk about, among other things, sort of the state of the internet in 2025, the year our Lord. But things just kind of keep happening to our federal government, to all the governments, to everything. There's a lot to wade through here, and I imagine, given your various projects, we should say up front, you got a book coming out. You almost always have a book coming out, so I could just record that now.
It's a filthy habit. Once you start writing them, you can't stop. Yes, my next book is historical techno-thriller set in the 1980s in the era of the weird PC called Picks and Shovels. And it's about a grifty PC company run by a Mormon bishop, an Orthodox rabbi, and a Catholic priest who are in fact running a pyramid scheme that preys on faith groups to sell shitty lock-in PCs. And it's about the women who take them on, a nun who's become a Marxist liberation theologist and left her order, a Mormon who's become a feminist and left the church over its opposition to the Equal Rights Amendment, and Orthodox woman who's come out as queer and been kicked out of her family. And they go to war against this weird PC company, which goes from being a trade war to a shooting war very quickly.
There's something for everybody in there.
Yeah.
As well as it's set in the 80s, right? Like in the early days of Silicon Valley.
Yeah. There's like Dead Kennedy shows and Reagan era AIDS denial and early PC companies in Silicon Valley, and that kind of heroic moment of the PC when no one knew what shape PCs were supposed to be or who was supposed to be using them or who was supposed to be making them or what they were supposed to do. It stars my recurring forensic accountant, Marty Hench, and it's his inaugural adventure. It starts with him at MIT flunking out of computer science because he's too busy programming computers to do his computer science homework, which I think happened to a lot of people at MIT. It happened to me at the University of Toronto and the University of Waterloo, which is how I never got an undergraduate degree. He ends up becoming a CPA because it's the community college has just bought Apple II Pluses for their CPA program. And he's just like, I'll do this just for the computer. And he ends up out west as a forensic accountant in the middle of this weird PC war that's really about the origins of the moment in which 30% of the people who contemplated computers were like, we're going to make everyone freer and better with these. And like 70% were like, we're going to figure out how to extract revenue and control people and spy on them with these. And he's on the side of the angels.
Right. In a ratio that has more or less, stayed constant until now, replaced with AI or what have you. Well, I'm looking forward to reading this one because this is the third book, even though it's like it takes place first in the timeline. It's the third book.
Yeah, they all stand alone. They're designed to all be read on their own. I wrote the first one with the odd conceit. What would it be like to write the grand finale of like a 20-volume, 20-year series of detective novels without the tedious business of writing the other 19 volumes? And it was so successful that my editor was like, oh, I need more of these. And the problem was I didn't want to bring my detective out of retirement because he retires after the end of the first one. He's 67 years old in that book. And, I know that, like, you have Sherlock Holmes coming back over Rickenbach Falls, but that was because Queen Victoria promised a knighthood to Conan Doyle if he would do it. And my editor, as powerful as he is in New York publishing, cannot knight me.
Can't quite promise that, yeah.
Yeah, but I realized you could tell these in like, any order, and that when you are out of chrono, you don't have to worry about continuity because you can always, like, tell another adventure where the continuity gets fixed. And in fact, the more weird details you throw in and then pick up in other volumes, the more of like a premeditated motherfucker you seem to be, even if you're just making it all up. So it's been really successful. People love them. The first two were national bestsellers. I have high hopes for this one. I'm just about to leave on a 20-city tour, so there's a non-zero chance I'll be in the same city as you, wherever you are, if you're listening to this, in the coming months. So yeah.
Yeah, so you could follow Cory's goings on at any of your many social media presences.
Just go to pluralistic.net and you can find all the links.
And that said, you're also working on, I understand, a book, a nonfiction book that sort of gathers your thinking and writing about enshittification, which is this concept and term that you've kind of somewhat reluctantly become the champion of and associate. I mean, yet not. I assume everybody's got to ask you about it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I don't mind. I like it. I actually, I just had my 23rd anniversary with EFF. Hail Discordia. And I have spent literally like most of a quarter of a century, like nearly half my life. I'm 53. So we're really getting close to half my life, trying to get normies to care about tech policy. And it turned out that swearing was the answer. And the fact that a bunch of people who would never have paid attention to tech policy are now reading like detailed socioeconomic political critiques of tech because it gives them a minor license to be slightly vulgar is, I think, a giant victory. So I'm very happy.
Well, so yes, don't sell it short either, though. I mean, I think that's an element. Like, it's fun. It's fun to say. It's a fun word. But I think it also very, eloquently encapsulates a trend that people just kind of intuit. They feel it. They, if you've been on the internet at all, you feel that things are shittier, and it like provides, some theory for a while.
Yeah. So it's a detailed theory, right? And that's why it's book length. This isn't one of those books like Chicken Soup for the Soul or something where it's like, 75 pages of aphorisms and then some like personal ruminations. It is a 90,000 word detailed case study filled book about how the internet turned into what it is today. Oh, it's just capitalism is a lazy way to talk about it, because it was capitalism back then too. And I just think that like the critique that goes, oh, these boy kings had the infinite patience required to wait for 15 years to spring the trap, as opposed to the total absence of impulse control that they demonstrate for us on a daily basis. So you need another theory, right? Like, what made them all go sour now? And so it's about like what policy shifts led to this moment, and how the changes in labor, IP law, regulation, and competition law just took away the things that stopped these assholes from living their true nature and allowed them to turn these services into what they would have made of them from day one if only they could have, but they couldn't. And so the implication of that is if we make it so that you can't do it again, then even if assholes start internet companies, they won't be able to do this to us again. And I finished it, but now I'm rewriting the last chapter to be a Trump chapter. And I start that chapter with there is a whole genre of books whose last chapter was rewritten because of the pandemic. This is going to be part of a whole genre of books whose last chapter was rewritten because of Trump.
Yeah.
And I'm writing it now, and I'm having a lot of thoughts about the current situation and what sources of hope and light there are in it, and what tactical thoughts we can carry into it.
Yeah, and that's honestly why I'm glad we're talking today above all, because I know you've been around the block a few times. You've had your nose in this stuff for decades now, so you've seen a lot of sea changes. We'll get to this in a minute, I think, but yeah, at a moment where there, it does not seem to be a surplus of hope, especially regarding sort of, tech policy and the internet. I think there's a lot to talk about, and I hope that we can dig into some more optimistic and sort of silver linings, so to speak, even though maybe that's a bit of a stretch to call that. But opportunities, right? There's opportunities here. But first, we got to sort of just get folks up to date a little bit. Like, I don't even, where do you even start this conversation? Because like, if we start our timeline on Monday, we could be talking for an hour. If we start on, so basically where we are at now, Elon Musk has been appointed to what was originally supposed to be sort of an extra governmental agency, DOGE, that was going to advise the government on how to cut things. Then it was brought into the government, and it was an Obama-era agency was reappropriated to be actually Doge living within the government. So now Elon Musk has access to federal powers and to the federal government, and he's gone in with this camp, this like squad of interns and young coders and engineers from his companies, this coterie of lackeys, and they have started demanding, access to all of our most sort of crucial systems at the Treasury, at USAID, at at you name it, at NOAA, GSA. They're going one by one to all the agencies.
Yeah, all the payroll and transaction stuff. All the stuff that would give Musk and his companies insight into competitive information for government contracts and bids. A lot of stuff where if it breaches, it's probably not going to be unbreachable. So, like they're in the Office of Personnel Management, which is like all the information you have to give to the feds if you're applying for security clearance, which is like literally everything that could be used to blackmail you. So it's like, I had a heroin problem. My mother attempted suicide. I'm in the closet about the fact that I was in a relationship with someone of the same sex when I was in college, even though I'm married to someone of the other sex, and all of that stuff, all the compromat is like sitting in a giant pile. Of course, we should point out that like the People's Liberation Army stole that data like 7 years ago in the OPM breach. So this is just like the second group of adversaries that has that, and a more up-to-date tranche of it.
And the ability to continuously, access it, right? It's like it's not just a snapshot now. And then, it's a fluid situation where they can, do any number of things with it. As long as you're sitting on all of this data, I'm sure there's many opportunities for exploitation and extraction. I think this is just the tip of the iceberg, like you were saying. Like I think like security breaches immediately come to mind. As you also said, the fact that like he could just access all of the contract data, and he's a huge government contractor. Let's not forget. He also has access to what has become the primary sort of propaganda organ of the right on X. So these two things, I think, are not unrelated. I saw somebody, and maybe it was a Democratic senator, who was worrying now if someone pisses off Elon Musk on X, he's got access to a lot of that compromat, as you said. And it is like the last Trump era for me anyways. It's always hard to dig into just how fucked we are, how concerned we should be, or if this is just one insane thing that happens in a litany of other insane things. What's your read?
I mean, greetings from the flooded zone and all, but what I think is neither Musk nor Trump have a lot of premeditation.
Yeah.
Right? Like they have revenge fantasies, right? And they have power fantasies, but they're not playing 11-dimensional chess. What they are superbly talented at running across the river on the backs of alligators without losing a leg. So they are always like doing the next scam before the previous scam can be truly held to account and sort of post-mortemed and understood. What Musk has done and what Trump has done is they have gathered to themselves a lot of stuff they can use to do other stuff with in the future, in that fluid improvisational style that characterizes them. And it's all bad, but what it's not is the reflection of like a super genius.
Yeah.
Like I got a little snippy with someone this week. I regret it. But someone who texted me, first of all, just don't text me. Not you. You can text me. I hate being texted though. I like email. I'm old. Like there's no way to mark a text as unread and come back to it later. And so you have to drop everything and deal with it. And then I have to type on my phone. And that's like having had a stroke and being aphasic because none of the words come out right.
I understand that. I feel that. An email is contained. It's like you can respond at your convenience.
Yeah, I've got a folder and I'm an inbox zero guy and I'll deal with it. Anyway, I got a text from someone who was like, I saw this Blue Sky thread where they explained how Elon Musk is going to use X to become the world's most important payment processor. And it's true. Like that's the thing Musk has been saying, since he was at PayPal, that he wants to do an everything app. And basically he wants to be in the finance industry. He wants to extend credit. He wants to be a usurer.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Right. Who doesn't want to be a usurer in that cadre? Now he's got to deal with Visa and he's going to be able to this. And he's got payment processing licenses in 26 important states. And I mean, that's all sort of true. And like my guess is that the way that unfolded is that one day, quite impulsively, he shouted out, go get me money transfer licenses in all the states. And someone who is marginally competent in his orbit filed a bunch of paperwork. And so some of that paperwork has come due. But the idea that like this is the plan coming together as opposed to a kind of like ADHD Selma Gundy of plan-like tiny particles that periodically will glom together to make something that from a distance resembles a plan. I just think it's wrong. And so it's very demoralizing, I think, to attribute to these guys super genius status. I think this is why I like Rick Perlstein's analysis of Project 2025 so much. He's the historian who wrote Reagan Land and Nixon Land, good old lefty. And, he said, look, the most important thing about these plans is that they're full of contradictions. There's like the chapter that says America's foreign policy is going to be staunchly isolationist. We're going to pull out of NATO. We're not going to support our so-called allies around the world. And then the next chapter is America is going to be an imperialist that's going to go and seize a bunch of land. The reason both of those things are anthologized in Project 2025 is that within the coalition that the Heritage Foundation represents the kind of organizer and hub for, there are mutually exclusive goals held by entities that are so powerful that neither one of them can be told, sorry, you have to eat shit because the other guy wins, right? And so instead, it's like we're all going to try and seize power together, and then afterwards we're going to turn on each other to see which one of us gets what we want. And you see this all over the place. There's the America First Institute that actually got to do a bunch of the key staffing roles instead of Heritage. Heritage was supposed to be like the HR department for the White House in waiting, and then Trump got angry with them because of Project 2025 and the negative publicity. And so the America First Institute, who are all ex-G.W. Bush types, they're like the conservative old guard that Trump and his core group hate, got to do a bunch of key appointments. So now you have key appointments from people who are cordially loathed by all of these other people. We see the high profile stuff, Steve Bannon calling Elon Musk an asshole or whatever, but it's fractal. Every department of the entire government looks like this, which, honestly, it's not all that different from all the contradictions of Bidenism, where you had Biden giving lifetime appointments to judges that ruled against Lena Khan when she tried to stop the Activision Microsoft merger, which is a nakedly anti-competitive merger. Right. And the judge, her son worked for Microsoft, and she was like, no, I don't need to recuse myself. I'm going to greenlight this merger. Right. So, every coalition looks like this. And, we know about it from the Biden land because there was actually this unity task force where the Sanders Warren wing of the party sat down with the finance wing of the party and divided up the White House. But we don't see it on the Republican side, but it's happening. And it's even grosser and more ad hoc and more vicious because those people are psychos.
Yeah.
And so it's going to, like, some Proud Boy weirdo is going to murk someone. There's such an unhinged coalition. And, like, again, if you want to think about tactics here and, like, where you can get hope for, rather than just fantasizing about what we'll do when there's, like, an implosion there, we can, like, make plans. Like, what do we do? We can look through Project 2025, see where the contradictions lie, and say, what are we going to do when this comes to a crisis? What are we going to do to whip up the part of the Trump base that absolutely doesn't want isolationism when they do isolationism, or that absolutely does want isolationism when they do imperialism? How are we going to get those people to make trouble and trip up the administration and keep everyone there miserable and unhappy rather than having our zone flooded?
I mean, something else that I wanted to ask you about was the internet itself. I mean, I think I haven't checked the latest status right now, but I mean, a great achievement over the last 10 years for public governance has been effectively putting a lot of data right online, making it searchable, making it available to the public, scientific research, medical data. Like, this is, I think, undeniably, at least until 6 months ago, would be something that said, this is a good thing. This is something that we have been able to make progress on. Now, 8,000 websites are down. They've been knocked out in part by, the anti-woke sort of automated systems flagging key terms that are supposed to come down, knocking out whole websites. And obviously, there's just been stuff that's been pulled offline altogether. What do you make of this sort of erosion and transmutation of sort of the digital public space?
Well, look, reality has a well-known left-wing bias. One of the things that is in the list of terms that you can no longer get an NIH grant for, and that all NIH grants in process, like all applications in process, are immediately rejected for, is having the word systemic in your grant, which is, I mean, that's chef's kiss, right? Like, it's a little on the nose, right? One of the reasons that the right got so pissy about COVID is that it really was a thing that you could only address systemically. right? Your individual actions could not resolve COVID. You can't make your own choices. These are collective things about epidemiology and contact tracing and herd immunity, and they just don't fit neatly within the ideological confines of the right.
It short-circuited them. It absolutely, I mean, you see the absolute vitriol over having to wear a thin piece of cloth over their mouths to protect other people in public, to me remains one of the great and telling sort of moments in, American political discourse.
And the surreal ideological backflips they did to justify that, where they just had all these things about like, oh, you're going to re-inhale the virus or something, like just this stuff that didn't make any sense facially, and that they either talked themselves into believing or pretended to believe or just said because it gave them some kind of excuse for it. But it was really batshit, right? Like it was really nuts. And I think that there's a lot of stuff in the NIH and in USAID and so on that either seems frivolous or colorably is frivolous, or at least has an ideological bent or whatever. As punishment to myself, I made myself go look at Matt Taibbi's blog today. And, he rattles off a bunch of stuff that USAID was doing that does seem a little like whatever, right? Like exploring the role of fashion in expressing queer joy in majority Muslim societies or whatever, right? So I look at that and I'm like, okay, this just feels like a thing that is pretty squishy. It may provide some benefit around the margins, but it feels a little first-year gender studies project and not like anything serious that you would do to actually try and lift people up or whatever.
Right.
But I don't think that constitutes any significant majority of it. And I also think that, some of these agencies whose missions are so mixed that there are parts of it that is leftist, we should probably cheer their demise, right? Like, so USAID, very famously a front for the CIA.
Yeah.
Right.
But I also don't think like it's not the issue. And I've seen this a lot too. And like, yeah, and I agree with you. Like, it's like when you get into the weeds, it's like a lot of it sounds kind of fuzzy and ridiculous, but on like two levels, right? Like it's not the fact that like programs are being shut down. It's the nature of the process. You have an unelected billionaire going in there and trying to just flip the switch, shut it off. I mean, like it or not, this thing was established by law, right? It was a Kennedy, Foreign Services Act.
Sure.
Yeah. You don't like it, pass a law, shut it down.
Yeah. It is, and it's very weird that they're not, because they do have the trifecta.
They could.
Right? They've got the White House, the Congress, and the Senate. It is weird that they're not doing it. And I want to be a little careful here, because I'm not wedded to constitutionalism. I'm wedded to my own idiosyncratic view of justice. And like, look, if Joe Biden had said, we're canceling student debt, and the Supreme Court said, you don't have the authority to do it, and he'd said, fuck off, yes, I do, I would have been cheering him.
I think, well, that's because it's your small d democracy. I think the public had expressed an appetite. It is pretty popular to want to do that, to forgive student loans, for example. I don't know USAID. I think, I think it's one of those, it polls unfavorably among certain conservatives, but I think most people haven't even heard of it.
I was the inaugural Canada to U.S. Public Diplomacy Fulbright Chair at the University of Southern California Annenberg Center. Like, I actually have had substantial dealings with USAID and with other public diplomacy programs. And I know a bunch of the people in those programs, and I think a lot of them are very good people doing good work. And USAID does a lot of stuff with like public health and refugee services, and a lot of stuff where if you're a conservative and you want people to stay where they are and not try and come here because they're desperate, USAID does a lot of that.
Yeah, work with refugees and yeah,
it's just cheaper to do it that way too. Like, it is far cheaper to make other people's countries livable than it is to try and resettle them here. It's arguably better for them, but also if you're a xenophobe who doesn't want people from other countries to move to America, this is like your ultimate thing. And I think that, again, when we talk about the contradictions within the coalition, this is like the conservatives who are like, I think we should get rid of abortion, which is why I think we should have lots more birth control. But then conservatives who are like, I think we should get rid of abortion and birth control, who don't realize that it's an either or proposition.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that, a lot of the attacks on these agencies come from that contradiction within the coalition. And it is freaking terrifying to watch Musk do this. I mean, what's actually demoralizing is not that Musk is doing this, but that the Democratic Party has not freaked out.
Has not more, I mean, they're starting to have some protests or whatever, but it is, I agree. It's very blatantly sort of extra constitutional. This is a law passed by Congress, and connecting this back to what we were talking about earlier, how it's not part of a 11-dimensional chess or anything like that. It is, however, probably rooted in some grievance that USAID inconvenienced Musk with along the way at some point. There's
apparently they're investigating one of his business deals for Starlink in Ukraine or something.
And honestly, like, that could be enough.
Yeah, sure. I mean, he might have just heard something along the way. I was talking with I think David Moskrop from Jacobin earlier today for his podcast. And I was talking about how Musk and, Trump especially, is an autodidact in the sense that he just doesn't have much formal education. He probably got someone else to write his papers at Wharton and stuff. Yeah. And so he just, speaking as someone who never got a degree and only knows a little about a lot, I totally recognize I know this one fact about Greenland, which is that it has whatever lithium or whatever, or I can name one president and it's Madison and I know everything about him, because this is basically my life. I get it. I just don't want to be president, and I'm also not, a sadist. But I think that Musk and Trump, it's not just that they remember the last thing someone says to them. They also are 1 inch deep and 10 miles wide. And so they know a little about a ton of things, just enough to have these idée feasts like, I'm going to go and take Greenland, or I'm going to get rid of USAID because they're woke or whatever.
Or requisition Gaza, or just own, that was Trump's latest. I mean, and you could tell that's just him in his improv zone,
going off the dome. That's injecting bleach.
Yeah, that's the bleach. And it's coming heavier and coming thicker also. Yeah. That'll be another interesting element to all of this, the shades of, because Biden kind of checked out, and they would sort of wheel him out and prop him up, and he'd kind of do his talking points and come off. Trump is a different level of kind of unhinged than he was last time, and his camp is really trying to contain that one, because the implications of that are so horrifying, even to certain people in his own party, a few of them at least.
I'm sure you know Sarah Jung, right?
The Verge editor?
Yeah. Did you read her incredible article about coming home drunk from a bar in South Korea to discover that the government was undergoing a coup, and deciding that she needed to go report on the coup, and going to the palace, the parliament, where the counter-reformation was underway and people were flocking to it. And at the Vanguard, where there's a Korean word for it, drunk guys who ride the subway late at night, and they were the vanguard, but then everybody was there, and then parliamentarians were live streaming themselves going over the fence and shit.
Yeah, I see.
And you look at this and you're like, where are the Democrats?
Yeah.
Where are the Democrats doing this?
I know it can't all be AOC, doing a live blog. It can't be. There has to be somebody else. There has to be more. I mean, it can be really demoralizing. I was reading something about, they were like, well, we were lucky to get everybody to at least abstain from just sort of confirming all of the appointees. But then they lost Fetterman and somebody else too, who just went ahead and voted for the next one anyways. And it's like, what are we doing, guys?
So first of all, why didn't Joe Biden spend whatever days he was ambulatory in Pennsylvania, or West Virginia rather, primarying Joe Manchin? And showing up and saying I am here because Joe Manchin is a feckless fuck who is destroying our government, and then the rest of the time in Arizona doing it to Kristen Sinema. And why aren't there prominent Democrat leaders in Pennsylvania right now saying we are here to support anyone except Joe Manchin, and just disciplining the party? This is what FDR did. FDR was not a political radical. He just had good political instincts. And, he came into office, read the political writing on the wall correctly, and played hardball, right? The story of what he did with the Supreme Court when they blocked his reforms. And he was like, okay, I'm going to introduce a mandatory retirement age for the Supreme Court. And they were like, no, you can't do that. And he was like, okay, I'm going to appoint one young person for every old person on the Supreme Court. And they're like, oh. And, eventually, it becomes clear that he's maybe got the votes. And then all of a sudden, one of these New Deal cases comes before the Supreme Court, and they overturn all their jurisprudence. They're like, actually, the New Deal is legal. Sorry. Yeah. Right? Just don't make this institution look like a toothless, reckless, undemocratic, pointless appendix on the American body politic. And we'll do anything you want. right? There's scope for this.
There is, yeah. I mean, the Democrats are afraid to wield power, and they have been for a long time in a serious way. I mean, they just cannot, they cannot match the ferocity of what the Republicans are willing to do. But even a fraction of that would be would be nice to see. Even now, they're so committed to norms. You saw that, the famous Biden taking tea with Trump, and, it's the norms and the standards and the procedure and the rules. Like, it's all just going to hold sway. It's like, it's inconceivable, even now, in the face of everything, that these things might buckle, that they might be ephemeral, that they might be made to blow away. I mean, my hope was that after a couple weeks, this animosity, this anger that so many people really have after it's become clear that, we're going to do this all again, that Trump is going to be just as nasty, maybe nastier. There are even nastier elements in the party willing to be more aggressive, more brutal, more unapologetic, jarring them, maybe, and waking them up. But again, you look at what the first instinct was. Like, Ro Khanna, who's supposed to be this progressive guy, is talking about how we should have been nicer to Elon Musk, or I'll be on the Doge committee. I'll join it. And it's just like, you are not operating on the same level. You are not playing the same game here at all.
I mean, there is I don't know if you saw David Dian led a package for the American Prospect called "We Found the $2 Trillion." They basically went through all of the private sector fraud in the government, right? Like, all the contractors who rip off the government, and the enormous cost of not developing public capacity and then hiring out to the private sector to do this. And it's not just the military, although the military has failed 7 consecutive audits and cannot pass an audit. But it's all through the government. It's highways and education and all kinds of things. And there is a move where you're like, I'm going to join Doge to insist that we hire more inspectors general and IRS agents to root out fraud from big business, and to put some CEOs in prison, because they're the people ripping off the American public. I think it'd be very popular.
Yeah, I mean, you have to be so much politically savvier and have a way to sort of communicate that effectively, because I almost got a sense that was maybe kind of what Ro Khanna was trying to do. He was maybe going to say, I'll go on there and point out that we're buying way too many, F-15s or whatever. But it fell so flat because he's so wishy-washy about everything. I mean, there's just been layup after layup after layup for the Democratic Party. When you get the FAA head to resign because you didn't like what he said about your company, and then you have a plane crash
in DC, like a fireworks show over the Capitol dome.
You say, look at this. This is Trump politics.
Right.
This is the politics of Trump. We're not saying he's responsible for this plane crashing, but this is what he wants. Less oversight, fewer rules, less expertise, and it's going to be a disaster for the American people. They just cannot even rise to that bar when there are layups there.
If we're getting to something useful here, we probably can't make Trump do anything or not do something, but we can make our own leaders be a more effective opposition to Trump. And I am actually thinking that, well, yes, we've got to form a protective ring around our immigrant neighbors and all those other things that we need to do right away, help our trans friends and siblings. We need to occupy the Democratic Party, and we need to occupy the trade unions, because, oh my God, right? We just had 4 years of the most labor positive National Labor Relations Board in history. The unions have more cash than they've ever had in history, right? They have more cash on hand. We have the highest approval rating for unions in generations, the largest number of workers who want to join a union for generations, and the unions are spending less on organizing than they ever have. And the number of unionized workers in America fell in the Biden years. We think about Sean, what's his name, the Teamster who went and spoke at the RNC. And
Sean O'Brien.
Let's string that guy up by his balls, whatever, right? But it's all of them. Right? If you're the leader of a union that sat on a giant budget and didn't do any organizing, when Jennifer Abruzzo was the general counsel of the NLRB, and she was saying that any interference in a union election requires immediate recognition of the union, and if you don't have a contract in 1 year, we'll impose a contract on you. If you didn't go out and spend all of your organizing dry powder during then then you have disqualified yourself from leading the union, and we should kick you out and replace you with someone who wants to lead a goddamn labor movement, not least because Trump has just zeroed out the NLRB, which means that we're no longer playing a game with rules. Yeah. Right? I mean, he thinks he ended the game. He just threw away the rule book.
Yeah.
You know, the NLRB exists because we had unions, not the other way around.
Right.
So we can do this again without rules.
It may be harder, and it may be, I don't know, at some point you start to say, like, do the accelerationists have a point? Does it have to get so bad before some fires get lit? I mean, because it is true. That was like the most dispiriting thing I saw, that we're down to like single digit percentage union density now. It fell actually during the Biden administration. And there's a lot of reasons for that. You know, yes, the unions have more money, but also the biggest employers are doing more union busting. Amazon is absolutely relentless. It's tough. It is hard. It's a tough environment.
But they didn't spend the money on organizing.
I know,
right?
they didn't. They should have. They absolutely
should have. Right? They like it's hard, so we're not going to take a shot. We'll save this money for what? For the Trump era?
Yeah,
what are you going to spend it on during the Trump era?
No, I think a rearguardism kind of set in over the last like 20 years. And, you know, I talked to a lot of really great people in the unions who are trying to sort of light fires. And there are some great unions, many, many great unions who have leadership that is more activated. But then you have the ones that aren't. You know, that's been really tough. And there's been some frustration there around a lot of people. And I see this in my work a lot of folks have been kind of frustrated, for instance, with how unions have sort of engaged with issues of AI, where it's like you have this thing that people are feeling existential dread over it taking their jobs that we want humans to do. And it's perfect for a union to step in and to say, like, we're going to help protect this job and let's get organized. But then, you know, a lot of the unions are still sort of, you know, reeling from the 20-year sort of, when Obama was like, technology's great, Silicon Valley is great, let's all, Airbnb is your friend, Uber's your friend, and they didn't want to look backwards. And there's still a lot of leadership, I think, that's still thinking that if they fight back against certain things and they expend money on organizing against AI, that they'll get burned. And I think it's wrong. You read Hamilton Nolan, who's like really been beating this drum.
He's definitely my rabbi on this, for sure.
And I think it can change. I do think because I think it's going to be one of the only levers we have left. As you said, we can still build power in unions. We can build it collectively, informally, or, you know, if we have to, formally, ideally. I mean, and look at one of the few things that has slowed down Elon Musk is that the Federal Workers Union filed a lawsuit saying that the head of the Treasury had overstepped. And then they said, well, okay, maybe we won't. They moved their meeting and they moved it to virtual. That's the only thing that they've felt some heat on so far, I think.
Yeah, I mean, and look, if unions want to fight AI, I know you are familiar with the work of Lee Vinsel and the idea of critihype. I think that if you want to fight AI, you don't fight AI by saying the AI is coming for your job because it can do your job. Yeah. I think you fight AI by saying AI is coming for your job because even though it can't do your job, your boss wants to fire you. And that's they spend all day thinking of ways to fire you. And then you are aligned with the people who want the thing that you do in your job. You know, if you're a customer service rep who actually helps people and you're going to replace by a chatbot that doesn't, then you and the customer who's going to have a problem are on the same side. You are class allies against your boss who wants to replace you with a chatbot. And so you need to be on the same side, right?
And I think most workers that are feeling the anxiety, I think that they understand it now, right? Like you're a nurse and the hospital's instituting AI. No nurse is saying, oh man, I'm worried about this is going to take my job. They're saying this is complicating the process by which I have to diagnose a patient who may have a life-threatening condition in real time. And it's putting real hurdles up to my ability to do my job. It's making things worse. What other sort of points of hope do you see? And I wanted to ask what, you think that folks who are worried about things like freedom of speech online, things that, that like sort of the digital rights that may or may not still be intact in a Trump administration. How do we approach thinking about things like that?
Well, so for me, hope is the idea that we can't know what actions might be available to us if we improve our circumstances. So if you find some way to make a small improvement in the way things are going, even a very small one, you will rise up the gradient towards the better world. And that as you ascend that gradient, you will find a new vantage point from which new terrain is revealed and new courses of action are made available to you. And so so long as there's something you can do that makes things even a little better, there's still hope. And that's the difference between hope and optimism. Optimism is just the fatalistic belief that things are just going to get better. And hope is the idea that human agency can improve the world. And so I've never been truly hopeless. I've been really sad. I've been really angry. I've been really worried. But I've never been hopeless because I can always see a thing that I could do that has a colorable chance of improving my situation, improving the situation of the people around me. That's where my hope comes from. In terms of privacy and speech and so on, thankfully, some of that groundwork has been laid reasonably well. So we have a pretty robust encryption environment online where it has become the norm for devices to encrypt your data at rest and to encrypt it over the wire. So the kind of eavesdropping that we saw from the NSA has gotten a lot harder. Now, of course, the people who operate the services can change how they work. And apps are a big problem for this because IP law makes it illegal to reverse engineer and modify an app. And so you can't add your own privacy layer to an app or an ad blocker or anything else to the app. And so apps are really particularly pernicious, as are lockdown platforms like iOS, because you can't modify those either. So in China, when it was politically expedient for Apple to side with the Chinese state, they removed all the working privacy tools from the App Store, and then there was no way to install a privacy app, a VPN. And then they backdoored the cloud encryption or the cloud storage so that every iPhone was backing itself up to a cloud server that the Chinese secret police could access. And so these lockdown mobile platforms are a serious problem. And this is a good moment to reassess all the lazy generalizations you have about open platforms being, quote, too hard for my mom to use, which is just, this kind of line of bullshit that infantilizes people and exalts a certain kind of paternalistic design that really flies in the face of any kind of power. Speech is much worse. And honestly, everyone who thinks that repealing Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act is going to help, this is your moment to understand. Twitter and Facebook could function just fine if they were in charge of eliminating controversial speech that might give rise to a lawsuit, because they, first of all, can fight those lawsuits, and second of all, they can afford the moderators, and third of all, they have a lock on their user base, which means that they can remove all the users, they can punish their users, and the users will stay because the service is too valuable to them because of the other users who are there. Meanwhile, if you want to set up a Mastodon server or a Blue Sky server, or you want to set up your own little group chat, and you're going to be liable if someone sues someone else for a speech act on that platform, you're fucked. And so the idea that somehow making speakers liable for speech acts rather than platforms that carry the speech acts was a gift to the platforms is so nuts and so visibly wrong. And the Communications Decency Act itself is 27 words long. You can fit the CDA in a tweet. Like, there's so much nonsense about what the CDA means. Go read the CDA and see what it actually means. And then read what Mark Zuckerberg has to say about it, which is that he wants to abolish it. You are not going to punish Mark Zuckerberg by helping him get rid of the CDA, which will make it illegal to compete with him. That's what he wants. So if we want to make a more robust speech environment, we have to create an environment in which providing a speech forum or the tools for speech does not give rise to punitive liability that will mean that only the rich and powerful can afford to be in charge of speech forums.
It's another one. I know there's a lot of debate over 230, and there's, but I think for the most part, I think it's pretty much moot for the time being. I can't see this administration doing much to touch it, but you never know. We talked earlier about enshittification, and I think it's something that so many people have really felt, on the internet, and we're hopeful that some remedies, particularly antitrust and as sort of pursued by Lena Khan, to sort of rein in the power of the platforms to just allow this mass enshittification. But now that those tools are more or less, at least, we could be surprised. You never know. But it looks like those tools are going to be gone at least for the next 4 years. Meanwhile, money is being shoveled into the AI furnace. It's just easier than ever to generate AI slop and to spray it all over the internet. What are your thoughts on the near future of the web experience, AI slop, and is there anything, we can do about it right now?
Well, there's no billionaire lobby for antitrust. So the huge surge in antitrust, and it's not just in the US, in Canada, Canada, its Competition Bureau in the entire history of the Competition Bureau, had only challenged 3 mergers and it had successfully blocked 0 mergers. And now the Competition Bureau has just gotten updated bipartisan legislation that gives it really beefy new powers. We have the Digital Markets Act and the Digital Services Act in the EU. You had a pretty muscular regulator in the UK in the form of the Competition and Markets Authority, but Keir Starmer just fired the head of the CMA and replaced him with the former head of Amazon UK, which, you know, if you voted Labour in the last election, I know voting Tory was terrible, but if you voted Labour in the last election, I hope you get the day you voted for. China has got a really robust, new, muscular antitrust enforcement environment, which you would never know from reading Western media, but the Chinese government is really down on Chinese big tech. They're really afraid of them usurping their power. And so, you know, the fact that this is a real groundswell, that it's a global groundswell, that it's happened without any money. You know, I'm sure you've seen that famous paper, I think from 2014, that analyzed the policy preferences of the public and the policy outcomes and determined that the only policy preferences that the public ever get expressed in policy outcomes are the ones that are like coterminal with the policy preferences of rich people. Yeah. And that where rich people want something and the rest of us don't, we always lose. Yeah. This is the first time we've had policy in my memory that regular people wanted and rich people hated on both sides, right? Think about, you know, Reid Hoffman and Mark Cuban demanding that Lena Khan be fired if Kamala Harris got elected, right? So this is an amazing thing, right? And just like with labor law, right? The reason we have labor law is because we have solidarity. And getting rid of labor law doesn't get rid of solidarity. Getting rid of antitrust enforcers doesn't change the political will that let them work. And I always, you know, make reference here to The Grinch Who Stole Christmas, right? So the Grinch thinks that he's taking the baubles and the tinsel and the trees because the people become Christmassy when they see them. And what he doesn't understand is that the reason people put up the trees and the baubles and the tinsel is because they felt Christmassy, right? Christmas was in them and the baubles were downstream of them. Antitrust action is downstream of a global groundswell of fury with corporate control and concentration. Getting rid of antitrust enforcers does nothing to change that fury. And honestly, getting rid of the rules doesn't mean we stop the game. It means we don't have to play by the rules anymore.
Well, thanks so much for joining us, Cory, my faithful temporary co-host. I look forward to wading back into the trenches again before too long. Good luck on the book tour.
Thank you very much. It was an honor to be your Shabbos Canadian.
Yes, our honorary Canadian and first guest host. Until then, bye everyone.
Adios.
Support the show on patreon.com/systemcrashpod to get a monthly bonus episode. And please rate and review the show wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time, bye.